Well, the crucial day of the Battle of Midway is June 4th. It actually lasted from the 4th through the 7th, but the morning of June 4th is the crucial moment in this confrontation, not only at Midway, but arguably in the whole Pacific War. The war sits on a fulcrum and is pivoting back and forth and could go either way.
In the early spring of 1942, they break Japanese naval communications for the first time. This is a huge breakthrough, and almost immediately they begin to see mention of Objective AF. That is where Japan is headed. There's overwhelming evidence that when the Japanese mention AF, they are talking about Midway Island.
Midway was a small, tiny outpost in the Pacific, and the fact that the Japanese would target this was not simply a measure of their ambition. It was a part of a carefully laid plan to destroy what was left of the United States fleet. Code breaking was a critical part of this entire operation. And the team that did this was led by a commander, Joseph Rochefort, who led a team of dedicated cryptanalysts. They knew that AF was Midway. They had no doubt about it from the beginning. But their superiors in Washington were less sure. Concern about that led them to fire back a message saying, well, how do you know? So the famous story that most people associate with Midway, that the Americans sent a message out to Midway Island by subterranean cable saying, send us a radio message in the clear announcing that your saltwater evaporators have broken down and that you're short of drinking water.
Send the message in a way that will make it look like it's an emergency, send it in a flash, and let us hope that the Japanese intercept it.
And sure enough, 2 days later, the Japanese radio message was intercepted that said AF is short of drinking water. Now they had the smoking gun. That was able to convince the superiors in Washington of something that Rochefort knew anyway, and Nimitz had already decided he was going to trust Rochefort's analysis. Well, you know, Nimitz is in a tough spot here because he has only 2 fully operational carriers and a third, the Yorktown, that had participated in the battle in the Coral Sea and was badly wounded. It limped all the way back to Pearl Harbor under its own power, but trailing a 10-mile oil slick behind it. The lower hull had open seams. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. The experts looked at it and said it will take 6 months in a dry dock to fix. Nimitz knew he didn't have 6 months. Thanks to Rochefort, he knew roughly when the Japanese were coming. He wanted that ship repaired and back out to sea in 3 days. Well, when an admiral says, do it in 3 days, the only response is, aye, aye, sir. So the team got to work on it, but it was jury-rigged. I mean, it was patched together. I mean, not quite with Scotch tape and baling wire, but very nearly so. And able, therefore, to get to sea just in time to join the other 2 carriers, the Enterprise and the Hornet, at a point north of Midway that had been designated as Point Luck.
Japanese don't think that our carriers have sortied from Pearl Harbor yet. And they are operating on the premise that it's time to subdue Midway, and they're going to launch bombing raids on the island. They're going to try to land troops there. Everything is focused on the Pacific Atoll. They're not worried about the carriers because they don't think they're out there yet. The way the plan is supposed to work is once Midway is attacked, then the carriers will sortie from Pearl. We'll see them coming, and with our overwhelming numbers, we'll be able to destroy them. Due to the code-breaking efforts by Station Hypo, we already are out there. The thing that really mattered were the carriers, and that's where the chess game comes in. Where are your carriers? Where are theirs?
First operations on the morning of June 4th come when the airplanes stationed on Midway Island strike at the Japanese carriers. Once their position was located by long-range PBY Catalina seaplanes and radioed back to Midway and also to the carriers, which of course are operating under radio silence but listening in on the radio net. Now the Americans know where the Japanese are.
The early parts of the battle do not go well for the United States.
Midway threw everything it had, nearly 100 airplanes, 90-some airplanes, at the WWII, at the Japanese carriers, and none put a scratch on them, even for a moment.
But at 10:15 on June 4th, Commander McCluskey is looking for the Japanese fleet. He's leading a group of torpedo bombers. They catch the wake of a Japanese ship. It seems to be headed quickly back toward the task force. They follow it, and it leads them to the main Japanese battle fleet. There are 3 carriers at the time that are in close proximity. There's an additional group of dive bombers led by Commander Leslie, and both of these dive bombing groups attack, and in about 25 minutes, all three Japanese carriers are burning.
That morning, the Japanese were winning the war. By that evening, the Americans are winning the war. And it's seldom in history that a battle is so decisive as that.
It really was a huge, huge turnaround. It was the Pickett's charge in some respects of the Japanese Navy, because from that point on, even though there are going to be several years of bloody fighting, I mean, World War II is not going to end in the next couple of months, but that's the high tide of Japan's advance across the Pacific. Were we lucky? In some respects we were, but as a wise man once said, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And we were very, very well prepared. Our pilots did their job, and because of that, they were able to reverse course in the Pacific War.